we are recording. There we go, folks.
Awesome.
Sitting tight for a few minutes while we work through some technical things. So welcome to today's webinar on how to rebrand, or actually how a rebrand can turn your identity into impact. Real quick, few quick logistics as we get started here. As you just saw, we are recording, so we'll send this to everybody afterwards. And we are going to end with Q&A session. So please use that Q&A panel. Don't use chat, use Q&A. If you have any questions as we go through this, ask your questions throughout. We'll get to them at the end. And that's it. So let's get going. All right, my guest today is Corey Westphal, CEO and founder of Mobile Assistant, the #1 rated dictation solution in this year's T3 Advisor Survey. Congrats on that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we're pretty proud of that one. Yeah, thank you.
You guys were on the All-Stars list, so that was cool to see.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This is a fun topic. So it's a little different than, you know, the API talk and AI talk that we have on a regular basis. It's fun to talk branding today.
Yeah, no kidding. Obviously, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I talk about it all the time in our newsletters and in my social media and everything. But I'm guessing the people who are here today, they're probably wondering right now. They're wondering, should I undertake a rebrand? What's a rebrand all about? And there's nobody better than you, man. To talk about that experience and how it's helping you shape Mobile Assistant even more into the company that you want it to be. So first of all, before we talk rebrand, tell me about Mobile Assistant. Give us the 10,000 foot view so that everybody on this call is familiar with you and what you guys do.
Yeah, so Mobile Assistant in a nutshell, we are a dictation service that is template driven. So we provide a template driven process for advisors to document their client interactions. And all the amazing technology that we've innovated over the years, it's all backed by human transcriptionists that actually do the work. And so that's kind of a little known, behind the scenes fact that makes us really special. It's what makes our notes over 99% accurate, and why the data is incredibly clean that comes from our service. And so we've been in the industry now for, I can't believe it's been almost 14 years now. We were one of the first companies that was on that KitSys roadmap. If you remember that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That map, if everyone's probably familiar with that on this call, wow, that map has changed a lot. It's gone from 189 companies 5 years ago to over 380 today. So a lot of changes in the industry, but we're really proud to have been a big part of the changes that have happened in the fintech sector.
Yeah, huge growth, man. I mean, big growth for you guys, big growth in the industry overall. It is so fascinating when you talk about how that fintech map has changed. Lots of rebrands, I'm sure, on that map. Lots of logos probably different than between now and the first one. So including your guys. So let's dig in. Let's get the inside scoop, right? About what fueled your decision to hit that refresh button on the Mobile Assistant brand identity. And I guess start us here, was it external feedback, things you're hearing from people outside the firm? Was it this internal intuition how did your process get jump started in the first place?
Yeah, so it's such a great question because, over the last few years, we have transitioned and evolved as a company a lot. We've gone and really grown from a company that's used by individual advisors as a tool for documentation to an enterprise solution that's used to really help teams of advisors to replicate process and streamline workflow. So because we were going through that transition, and especially, I think back a couple of years ago, I was at the Jolt conference. For those of you that don't know, that's the biggest marketing only exclusive fintech industry event that goes on, and it was an amazing conference. It was a lot of discussion at that conference about branding, about how to tell your story, about what your values are as a company, and is that reflected in your brand. And honestly, I left that conference with a really inspired thought process that, hey, we're moving and evolving as a company. we really might have to consider redoing our brand and really thinking about like what our brand is representing out in the industry. So, you know, when I got back in town from that event, I get together every so often with a good friend, Tony Steek. And Tony, he's over in Milwaukee. I'm right here in Madison, so it's easy for us to get together for a cigar every once in a while. And we talk about a lot of industry things. Tony has, AKA Mr. Purple, by the way, for those of you that don't know. But he
Yes.
is an incredibly sharp mind when it comes to marketing in the fintech and financial industry. And just like I've tried to do as I've grown this company over the years, I've really relied on the input from others that I really respect in the industry, whether that's on our operations side, on the technology side, if it's when it comes to marketing. I really was leaning on Tony to say, hey, what do you think? This is what we're doing as a company. And the first thing he told me was, you need to rebrand. Like, if you're going to be changing as a company and you're not the same company as you were 5 years ago, your image and your brand has to change. Even though you love it and you like the website and you like the logo, it's time for a change. And so that's what prompted it. And honestly, that's how I was introduced to you, Johnny, is because, you know, when we talked about it, I'm like, I'm not even really, I told him I don't even know where to start as far as getting help when it comes to this project, because it is a big undertaking to redo your image, redo your messaging. And so he had showed me a couple projects that you had worked on that Three Crowns was involved in, and I was just really impressed. And so that's how I got in touch with you, and the rest is history, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, spoiler alert for you guys listening. Three Crowns worked with Corey on the brand for mobile assistant, which, I mean, one of the most fun things we've ever done, man. But let's talk about that part of the process, because so much of any kind of big project like this, you know this as a fintech who partners with firms, that partnership is critical. Who you choose to work with is not just choosing this outsourcer who you don't have a lot of interaction with. It's a lot of interaction. Like, we became much better friends through this process as a result, right? Because you're talking a lot. So what's your advice when you're looking for a partner to take you through rebranding? What should people look for? And ultimately, from your experience, how did you know you were making the right decision to move forward? For you, that was with us, but I think we can apply this to whoever anyone would choose to work with on this front.
Well, I think that question is much easily answered now than it was prior to starting to work with you and your firm, because going into it, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if we would just start looking at different logos and different colors and just strictly just look at the visuals, right? The reason why I know we made the right choice and I know we got to the right outcome when it comes to our brand is that you started and your team started with the people. You started with interviewing all of the members of our leadership team. And I think that is an amazing, like, a really great marker of a company that really knows their stuff when it comes to branding, because the brand is all about what your values are as a company. It's not just an image, it needs to project what you're trying to communicate to the industry and to your customers. And one of the ways that you have to start when you start a project like that to undertake a rebrand, you have to start with your own internal team and your people, and make sure that, first of all, that everyone is aligned with what your values are and what the leadership really thinks that they're projecting or want to project, what's important to them. When you have individual interviews like you did with all the different team members outside of like a big team meeting, I think you found that it was really interesting to learn what was important to Mobile Assistant as a whole, and not just the CEO. And so I think that that's a really great gauge of who you work with. Is are they looking to learn more about you? Do they want to understand your culture? Do they want to understand what your value prop is? All of that goes into a rebrand design and project.
Yeah. And I think for me to add my 2 cents onto that, I think anybody who's on this call listening or watching afterwards, a rebrand is very much a conversation, and it's an evolving conversation. And so it's not this engagement I'm sure you can find those types of engagements where you just go, hey, we want a new logo, and somebody just tosses back a few logos. And you can do that. You can go on Fiverr. Obviously, like you're saying, that's not the way that we go through it. So I think, if you are thinking of rebranding your company or a brand refresh of any kind, as you start down that road of who to partner with, like really understanding what's the process, what's the approach, and then is it someone who can, I think, moderate large group discussions depending on how big your firm is. Like you guys have a sizable leadership team. Some firms might be a few people, some people might have like 10 people involved in that decision, but someone who can be that little middle point, to take in all those different perspectives, and make them cohesive and kind of find the little glimmers of agreement around people, because there ends up being a lot of disagreement in a company, that gets hidden about the brand itself. That's especially true, I think, when you got partnerships. If you've got 4 partners, if you're an REA firms, like eventually, if they've been together long enough, those 4 people will have all different ideas of what the brand is. So it's a big part of that process is like, let's come back together and let's restitch ourselves here and start things
Yeah.
off that way.
Well, I think a mistake that's made a lot of times is that people think that a rebrand is just client facing and it's just customer facing. And what I would encourage everyone, especially on this call, to think about today is that utilize the rebrand as an exercise that strengthens your company from the inside, because that's really what it did for us. It showed our team that everyone's input is valued. Their feedback was valued. We wanted to hear from everyone. And I think that sends such a great message as a company that, I'm not in this alone. I have this amazing team that is working at Mobile Assistant, that I want to make sure that everyone understands that we want to hear from everybody when it comes to what our branding really should be and what our direction is. So it's a really great culture check, is the way I would put it when it comes to what that exercise of rebranding is all about. So we got a lot of value out of it that was not really seen in the public view, right? Obviously, you can see that our logo changed and our messaging changed and our website changed. But what people don't see is the positive impact it had for our company on the culture side behind the scenes.
Yeah. And we could dig into that behind the scenes a lot more, but a big part of a rebrand is what's in front of the scenes. So let's look visually, because I do want to talk through the visuals of things. Let's spend some time just talking about the logo. So I'm going to bring up a snapshot of the old logo and the new logo side by side. So I will do that first. Okay.
By the way, while you're doing that,
there we
I was
go.
going to say, while you're bringing this up, I wanted to just state how incredibly much harder this was than I thought it was going to be. When we first undertook this, I was like, "Oh, this won't be hard. We'll just get a new elephant, and it'll be great." It was not easy. It was definitely the hardest part of the rebrand, was coming up with this design, for sure.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, breezed through retooling the messaging, the rest of kind of the brand palette and everything. We made some tweaks in the colors and in the typography, but that logo, I mean, we really wanted to get right. And so we spent a lot of time going back and forth in this until we both felt like, okay, this is it. This is perfect. And one of the most interesting things to me about branding process is finding a way for like the visual identity to live alongside and ultimately like support the brand message and really communicate something about the brand itself, right? So talk to us. Talk to us about this new logo. What's it represent? Why you felt like this update makes a big difference in the brand image.
Yeah, well, we were really fond of our old logo. It really got to be part of our culture. It got to be part of our recognition in the industry, that when people saw that logo, that elephant, that was Mobile Assistant. And so the change to the new logo was definitely, the idea was that since we were transitioning and evolving as a company, we wanted it to look more modern. We wanted it to look more forward facing and more future forward facing. And And so because of that, like, I think we landed on just a really more streamlined, like a little cleaner image. And I'm incredibly happy with it now. It took a little while to get used to just because it's a change, right? But
Yeah.
one of the smartest things that was done was kind of incorporating the talk bubble in the image. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah. And so to me, that kind of brings up that point of like, okay, how does our visual language kind of reiterate and emphasize the language that we're using every day and what we're all about? And so as a dictation solution, bringing back transcriptions, you're talking instead of typing. You guys have used that talk, don't type, that tagline a lot over the years. And so it kind of brings in both the input on the advisor side of, hey, I'm just going to talk this out, and then the output on the transcriptionist side, you're typing things up. So being able to figure out a way to represent that, without even saying any words was a fun challenge.
Yeah.
And like you said, that took a bit of time to figure out how to do that. So,
yeah, well, and
yeah.
I've got to tell this part of the story because it really is a pretty cool part of the process. And that, when Johnny says it took some time, he's not lying. Like it was incredibly frustrating for him, I know, because when this was, just so everyone understands, this was really very close to the original design that you presented to me. You'd worked on it for months. You came and showed me this. And the first version of it that I saw, I was like, that's not it. And you went away and
Yeah.
you ended up sending me like 10 new ones. I think we went back and forth forever, weeks and
Yeah, we had
weeks.
a lot. Yeah.
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 And I know I was getting frustrated. You were frustrated. And I think that's really important to note that that's part of the process. Part of the process is it doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it really does take a lot of effort and a lot of rework before you get the right design. And so I was sitting at my house, and my wife had had seen that I was really struggling with this rebrand. My wife Stephanie is also our CFO, COO at Mobile Assistant, and so she's very much lives Mobile Assistant just like I do. So she knew that I was struggling with this rebrand. She knew that it was a big decision to make, and how we were going to change our look and our feel. And so she saw she asked me to show her the original logo that you had sent me, Johnny, and I showed it to her, and she goes, "Oh, okay. Why don't you make this one change?" I changed the one
Mm-hmm.
thing she asked me to change, which was to make those talk bubbles in that section. And she basically stood up and walked out the room because she's like, "That's it."
Just a mic drop by
Little
Stephanie
mic
there.
drop. Yeah, so I give Steph a lot of credit because I couldn't see it, and she had made that one suggestion, and that was it. And I knew it immediately. And I wish I could have seen your face when you saw when I sent it back with that modification, because you were probably like, "Oh my gosh, so simple,
I did.
but very much a difference." Yeah.
Yeah, it was like just a head smack thing. But I mean, I love that story because to me, like, that perfectly encapsulates how it's a collaborative process. It is bringing ideas from both sides together until you discover like that kind of magic moment. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, Stephanie, amazing hero of the story. Um, but okay, let's dig in to the post branding process just a little bit. Okay, so this is actually kind of like my last structured question for you, and then we will get into some Q&A time. But once the rebrand's done, what's the impact you've seen on Mobile Assistant internally, on your marketing, on your sales? Like, have there been differences in both how the brand is recognized internally and perceived externally?
Yeah, well, I'll start with like the internal impact. I really feel like the impact to our team was that it was really shown that we're not afraid of change. We're not afraid to evolve as a company. And I think that's really important to be able to really demonstrate that with an act such as like a big rebrand like this, that, hey, we're not afraid to move forward as a company. And even though everybody loves that old image, loves that old logo and the old elephant, it's time for a change. And so I think that message was really loud and clear with our team. And externally, you know, I really love the feedback that I've gotten, which is, hey, you guys are growing up as a company, and it shows in the way that the images that you have on your website, and the professional way that, you know, your logo is displayed in a lot of different places now, throughout the industry. I think that's the biggest impact that I was really hoping for, which was, hey, you make this change. You want people to notice. You want people to take notice, because you're making changes as a company to be better. And there's no better display of like a change and an evolution as a company as a rebrand. So
Absolutely. And I think this gets us into certainly the larger discussion around branding, which is that ultimately you put the brand out, but then how people begin to receive it and form their own opinions, and you know, it's almost like a postmodern sort of critique. But you know, your brand becomes this living entity that is ultimately dictated by others, and so you put this out with what you hope it conveys and what you want it to project to people, but ultimately your brand becomes something that, you know, your clients, your prospects, your partners really begin to build up around for you. And I think that just illustrates that concept really well.
yeah, well, and one of the things that you may notice is that, like, the image behind me, our logo for Talkit. So Talkit is our mobile application. And what I found is that the rebrand really gave us the opportunity to showcase our different products, because we are so much more than a dictation service. We not only have the Talkit mobile app, but we have the ATM, which is an assistant template manager for companies to manage those templates for teams. And we have a connected open API product that just launched. Well, there's a separate logo now for each one of those products. And so it's allowed us to utilize the branding in a way that everything is powered by Mobile Assistant, but it really, the image that we had before and the logo we had before didn't allow for that kind of growth. And so I think that was another, just visually, a really great addition with this rebrand, that we could really use it to showcase the different products as we were releasing them throughout the year.
Yeah, yeah, unifying that product lines. I mean, for fintechs especially, that's an important thing to be able to do. Okay, man. I mean, that's, I think, a great snapshot of just end to end. You know, you took us through the before, you took us through the during, you took us into the after of like a lived experience with a rebrand. So I want to thank you for sharing all those things. We've got some time for Q&A here at the end. So if you're hanging out still and you've got questions about Mobile Assistant, about branding itself, pop into that Q&A, ask those questions. I've got one to start you off with, and that is, I mean, you touched on this earlier, but who should be involved in rebranding? You know, how many employees do I ask to join in? What's your take?
Right. Well, you know, it is a hard question, because the companies are all different sizes and are made up of different size teams. But what I found is that almost every company will have what they would consider their leadership team. And that is, to me, the essential group of people that are really front and center with your brand, that whether it's internal or external, doesn't matter, that you really want to make sure to get a pulse on where they're at, from like what is important to them at the company, right? And so I think that's a really good place to start, is to think about what you consider your leadership team, and then you can always expand out from there. But I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, and I think my 2 cents on that is, I think you start big, and then you narrow as you go toward decision making points. You know, you certainly can have a project where it's like too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing. Like if there's too many people trying to make a decision, no decision is going to get made. So, you know, if you're a larger company like you guys are, you know, involve a lot of people, collect a lot of feedback, a lot of ideas, but then pull it back to when it's decision making mode. You know, it's leadership team. You know, it's ultimately, you know, you were ultimately leading that as the CEO, but that really narrowed as we went. So, I've got a question from Cheryl, and she says, dramatic and astounding transformation, first of all. So Appreciate the positive words, Michelle, for sure. So not knowing your company, I can tell, you're old and new give entirely different impressions of who you are and what you do. How do your brands allow you to easily answer the question, who are you? Like, how does that new brand allow you to answer that question more easily?
Well, I think one of the parts of the process when it came to the rebrand was very much like, what does our website look like? Because that is the first impression that a lot of people are going to get of your firm and your company is going to be from that site. And so what I really appreciate is that we took a lot of time to try to make sure we got that right, to be able to tell that story, so that when somebody came to our website, they could easily tell like what it is that we did as a company and what makes us different. Like, what are the main features? What are the templates all about? What's the open API? What's the benefit of that? I think that's really an important part of the rebrand, so that it's not just, you don't just redo your image and redo the imagery on your site, but really think about how you're telling your story. By doing that and really taking a lot of time to try to get the content right, I think that's a really big part of it. Is if you're going to have a successful rebrand, you've got to have a website redesign that really takes into consideration all that entire process as well. So you're really conscientious about exactly what the message is you're trying to get out there, because that's what your website's doing for you.
Yeah, rebrand never just stops with the logo, right? I mean, that's got to go somewhere, that's got to live somewhere, and often updating that message to be fresh and new as well, that's going to be a piece of things. Absolutely. Um, Another question for you. So I think you said what, almost less than 14 years in the industry now. This was kind of the first major big brand change. This question is,
Yeah.
how often should we rebrand? So I'll get your take first.
My take is very different now than I think it was prior to this rebrand, because I would have said, oh, it's such a big project. It's such a big undertaking. You probably only want to do it every 5 years or something. I think it really is very much specific to your company, and that is your company. If you ask yourself the question, are we in the same place? Do we offer the same things? And are we in the same place as we were 2 years ago? If the answer is yes, then I think you're good. If it's no, if the answer is, wow, we got so much more to offer now because we have evolved, we're doing so many more things as a company. I think if you're moving forward as a company in that way, and you have really a new ROI to offer the industry and to offer your customers, I think it's worth considering a rebrand when you feel like you're at that point. If you can't go to your website or look at your brand and feel like it's telling that message of where you're at that time as a company, then it's worth considering. And that could be in 2 years, that could be in 5 years, just depends.
Yeah. I think too, it's important to realize how modular these things can be, right? Like, a rebrand doesn't always have to look like, what Mobile Assistant did or what Nitrogen did, where it was just a wholesale pull it back to studs and rebuild, rebuild. And Nitrogen even had the added complexity of a new name from Riskalyze. So that was
right.
Even more to it. But it can be modular, right? So like re-messaging certainly can be a component without a new logo, or hey, we feel like our color palettes become dominated, like we're seeing our competitors have a very similar look to us, so let's just come back and let's look at a new color palette or new typography, things like that. So you can really take a look at the brand and then take out pieces of it too to update too. So it doesn't it's always, it's a project no matter what, right? But there can be pieces that you can swap out and go through. So it's not just like, okay, every 5 years we're doing a whole new brand identity. There's pieces of that identity that you can freshen up as you go. And we've even done that. We've changed our logo a couple times in the 6 years at Three Crowns. I think we've landed on the one that we're going to stick with, but there were some evolutions, some iteration of like, okay, yeah, how do we stand out in the industry from other marketing agencies and do that visually? And so it's a continual, brand is a living thing. It's a continual conversation. All right, last question, Corey. I'm going to let you go. What would you say are mistakes to avoid when going through a rebrand? from your experience, anything you feel like, this is maybe something I wish I'd done differently, something I wish I'd known about more, or even just from other business owners, of like, should have done that.
Well, I definitely have a strong opinion of what the biggest mistake is that you could make, and that is it's really easy to fall into the trap of I know best, right? That as the CEO, as the owner of the company, you do have a lot of great ideas, right? That really lead your company. But when it comes to the
Yeah.
brand and the way that it's displayed to the world, I think it's incredibly important to be humble as a leader and step back and let your team shine through a little bit more and really take their input, take their feedback, and don't just dismiss it if it's not in line with what you're thinking, because very well it could push you in a direction that you wouldn't have gone, that can help to really make your rebrand amazing. And so, so that would be, my last thought, I guess, when it comes to these type of projects, is to take a step back, and let your team lead a little bit, and then you all come back together at the end, and it'll make it even better.
We came for the branding lessons. We leave with a leadership lesson. So just coming out from all angles. Corey, thank you so much for joining us, man. Everybody listening on the call, just thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And if you want to learn more about Mobile Assistant, go to mobileassistant.us. If you want to learn more about Three Crowns, go to threecrownsmarketing.com. See you around.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, Johnny.
Bye.